panhandle to communities, especially in the north central part of the state. However, if you're in an evacuation zone in South Florida, you need to leave now. Port Everglades will be closing tonight for safety, and gas will no longer be resupplied into much of southern Florida after the storm hits. Until after the storm hits. If you're concerned that you can't get out because of whatever reason, traffic, fuel, whatever it is, 1-800-342-3557. We will do everything we can to get you out, but you cannot wait. Shelters. Last night I directed all schools to be closed. K-12, state colleges, universities, all to be closed, and all state offices were closed effective today through Monday. This is to ensure we have all the space we need for sheltering and staging. Floridians have to have access to every place they can for a shelter. Shelters are available, and you should follow the directions of local officials to go to the shelter that fits your needs. Volunteers. Over 17,000 people have volunteered to help in this. I think, first off, thanks everybody for volunteering. We need more. I know we're going to need more. I want to thank everyone who's opened their hearts to help, and we can't thank you enough. If you want to volunteer, go to volunteerflorida.org to sign up for volunteer opportunities. National Guard. All 7,000 members of the National Guard that are available have been activated as of today. Every member available has been activated in advance of this storm. They are working hard to make sure we all get to safety. Utilities. They're actively pre-positioning resources throughout the state and in neighboring states. We know how important power is, and we're going to do everything we can to get the power back on after this storm hits. It's a little harder to get pre-positioned when you have the whole state being impacted by this storm. I want to thank the governors of other states that provided every resource we've asked for. A lot of governors have reached out to me, and I've called others to ask for resources. Everything I've asked for, they've done. I know the entire country is behind us, and we have the best first responders in the country spread throughout the state and neighboring states ready to help. But let's think about it. We're running out of time. This storm's going to hit. It's almost here. If you're in an evacuation zone, don't wait. Get out now. This is a catastrophic storm that our state has never seen before. Remember, we can rebuild your house, you can get your possessions again, you can't rebuild your life, and you can't rebuild your family. Protecting life is our absolute top priority. No resource or expense will be spared to protect life. Florida is tough, Florida is resilient, Florida is unbreakable. Let's all stay together and help each other. We are an amazing melting pot of loving people, and I'm proud to be the governor of this state. Este huracán es muy peligroso. Su vida es lo más importante. Cada familia debe de tener un plan. Por favor, salgan si están en zona de evacuación. Por más información, por favor llamen al 1-800-342-3557. Mi prioridad es que todos, familias, turistas, estén seguros y preparados. Tienen que tener 3 días de agua, alimentos y las medicinas que necesiten. Como gobernador, mi prioridad es que todos en la Florida estén seguros y preparados. Now I'll turn it over to Sheriff Scott. I can tell you, my experience with Sheriff Scott is an individual that shows up each and every day to protect the citizens of Lee County. He will do everything he can to protect every citizen here, but all of us have to work to take care of each other.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Just a bit about local law enforcement. I spoke personally this morning with the area chiefs, all of the sheriffs, united on the front with our federal counterparts, and of course our state counterparts like the Highway Patrol and FWC and others that are here with us. Law enforcement, of course, remains committed to the primary efforts of public safety. I've heard some questions recently about bridge closures and talking about when law enforcement or public safety actually withdraws, typically at that 40 to 45 mile per hour sustained wind. That's when law enforcement will withdraw as well. However, we will be all hands on deck right up and until the impact and then immediately after within reason. I want to share something, too, that's not been said. Typically, as with Andrew, and the governor mentioned Andrew, I was a young deputy and went from this coast to that coast for Andrew. There's a big difference with this storm, and it bears noting that because of our mutual aid throughout the state with the Florida Sheriff's Task Force that is chaired by Sheriff Bill Promell just to the north here in Charlotte County, and I was on the phone with him all morning, because of the nature of this storm and the way it's expected to impact the entirety of the state, versus a specific region, it has crippled, frankly, and I wish it were better news, crippled to an extent what we typically are able to do in terms of committing resources to other areas. For example, in Andrew, law enforcement from this side of the state went to the other side and assisted. That is not going to be anything immediate, and so local law enforcement, specifically in this region, will be somewhat on our own in the immediacy of this. Beyond that, I want to talk about evacuations. The governor mentioned midnight tonight. That's a great benchmark to hit in terms of not going to the roads. Earlier today, our county, very earlier, just moments ago, in fact, our county manager and our county attorney finalized Zone A, which is a new zone in terms of mandatory evacuation. I think that's been released in a media release, but I want to speak to that now. That includes a lot of the corridor along Bayshore Road, just north of the Caloosahatchee River, and it also includes now much more down in the south. Estero, Bonita, I know Mayor Simmons and others are here from that area. The Imperial River area is affected by that. It means what it is. It's a mandatory evacuation, and we want people to understand it doesn't necessarily mean you have to gather all your belongings and get on the road. There are shelters available. Right now we have over half a dozen shelters available, all with available space, and the county is working very closely with those assets, as the governor mentioned, schools specifically, to make sure that we have plenty of space for folks. So the
you were hearing that governor news conference and also hearing some law enforcement from that area. Just talking about the complexity of this storm. We need to get to Chris Stewart now in the newsroom.
Yeah,
right?
Chris Stewart, you're always on top of the latest information. What are you seeing out there?
Well, some interesting video just coming down on our feed. You know, we've certainly seen the roads in some areas just packed with people who are evacuating South Florida ahead of the storm. How about this for a way to evacuate? This is the Enchantment of the Seas in the Port of Miami, and what Royal Caribbean is doing is loading their employees and their loved ones on this ship, and they're pretty much just going for a cruise. Their plan to just sail to calmer waters away from this storm. So when you think of all the different ways people are hunkering down for this storm, evacuating this area ahead of this storm, a real unique way, perhaps you could say evacuating in style, that some cruise ship employees are doing down in Miami.
Just a lot to get to. We are so glad you're joining us for our continuous coverage. It continues after this short break.
We'll be right back. Yeah, we noticed. And you know, I was really check. I was really.
Mic check 1 2 3 4.
he's been a little overboard.
You're the man, Logan.
Drop a little whiskey in the coffee.
Wait, make that two of those.
Wonderful. So it has shifted. Wow, it's. Oh shoot. Max 2. I'm Max 1. Max 1. Hurricane watch. Okay.
Goes all the way down to Bahamas, Texas, Caicos, Cuba.
Watching Hurricane Irma and tracking it as it moves closer to Florida. We have, of course, watches and warnings in effect as we roll into the evening. The storm is actually gained a little bit of strength this afternoon. The winds are 155 miles an hour at this point, and it is moving just north of Cuba. You can see the eye of the storm right there. And the latest coordinates moving west at 14. And that track is expected to continue until it makes it to the north coast of Cuba with a turn after that. The computer models are coming in this afternoon, and actually the latest European model is starting to come in, and it's suggesting even a little bit farther track toward the west, more into Collier County, which works in our favor. Optimistic in a sense. We want to see that track shift west, and it gets the strongest winds out of our area. But at the same time, be very cautious about these shifts, because as we've been showing you for the last week and a half, the computer models will shift one way and then they come back to the east and then they go back again. And at this point, these shifts are going to be very subtle. They're going to be 20, 30, maybe 40 miles each side. Call that the windshield wiper effect. And the computer models are the very, very finely gridded models, and we're going to see these small fluctuations the next couple of days. But this is still a very powerful hurricane. And either way, if the shift is to the west, we're dealing with hurricane force winds here either way, simply because it's such a large storm. All right, the 2 p.m. intermediate advisory is out, so we're along the north coast of Cuba. Went through the Turks and Caicos last night. We all watched that as that eye, the eye wall just sat over the Turks and Caicos through the evening hours. Saturday, we have a storm that just kind of cuts along the north coast of Cuba and then brings it up. You can see just to the west of Key Largo, kind of the middle Keys at this point as a Category 4, 145. Now, as we've been talking for the last, couple of weeks on this thing, keep in mind that intensity forecasts are problematic. So I always tell people when we give hurricane talks, the most likely scenario here is a Category 4, but there is a chance that we could see a 3 or a 5. The intensity forecast, no one forecasted that it was going to be 185 miles an hour for almost 2 days earlier in the week. So, that the scenario is for a 4 making landfall and then weakening as it moves up across the western side of Lake Okeechobee and then tracking up into North Florida, and then eventually we'd have a rainmaker, a tropical depression, or a remnant low cutting across Atlanta after that. So here we go with our watches and warnings. We have a hurricane watch for the Treasure Coast. We have a hurricane warning in red. That's for Palm Beach County. And likely that watch on the Treasure Coast will be bumped up to a warning shortly because we're just seeing this storm come closer. And remember, warning criteria is that hurricane conditions are likely within the next 36 hours, and a watch is 48 hours out. What are we looking at as far as the impacts here for really the 4 key elements of a hurricane? The wind, Category 4, possibly a 5 at this point, looking at a 4. Think about this. The storm right now is 155 miles an hour. 2 miles an hour stronger, and it is a Category 5. And I think we've almost, in a sense, become numb to the fact that it was 185 for a couple of days, and 145, 155 doesn't sound too bad. Those are extremely dangerous hurricanes. even at that speed. So that's important to realize, and even though we're seeing these shifts to the west, we're still looking at significant wind and storm surge and rainfall here. The tornado threat, it will be around. You need two things for tornado development. You need warm air rising in the atmosphere, and you need wind shear. We have both of those with a landfalling hurricane. So there will be a tornado risk, and flooding rains, obviously. At this point, it appears to be about 5 to 10 inches of rain, but some areas could get locally higher amounts than that. Storm surge will also be an issue along the coastline. Now, the farther west the track shifts, the better the storm surge scenario pans out for us, because you need a couple of things for storm surge. You need strong winds moving over that water, and you also need what we call fetch, which is a long stretch of winds moving in toward the coastline. And those two elements, we're losing one as the storm moves to the west, because now a lot of the winds are over Florida and not over the ocean and the Gulf Stream and the Bahamas. So these numbers will change too as we go through the next couple of days. But there will be a storm surge either way, because it's such a large system. But as it shifts a little west, we're looking at those numbers dropping a little bit. I caution you, though, there's a sense of optimism out there, and I can feel it, but the tracks could easily shift back to the east. That is possible the next 24 hours, so keep that in mind. All right, here's a breakdown of our timeline as we roll through the next 3 to 4 days. Gusty winds today, obviously, not bad out there. A fantastic day to get your last-minute preparations in place. Tomorrow morning shouldn't be too bad, but we start to get into some very gusty winds and some of the outer rain squalls, the feeder bands of this hurricane as it moves closer. So by the afternoon and evening, we're dealing with some pretty nasty weather. You don't really want to be outside. Saturday night and into Sunday, we're looking at tropical storm force winds, so those are 39 miles an hour stronger, developing into hurricane conditions on Sunday. Those torrential rains picking up as they sweep all of those feeder bands in off the Gulf Stream and across South Florida. Peak day is Sunday, and on the current timing, it looks like Sunday afternoon through about the early evening hours. It places the center of the storm very near the lake in the late afternoon, early evening. So that's when we would expect to be near the core of the hurricane. At this point, that eye is forecast to be just west of the lake, but those strong winds stretch out. Well, the hurricane force winds, 50, 60 miles, and the tropical storm force winds will cover the entire south and central Florida area on Sunday afternoon and evening. And then we're looking at peak storm surge as we get into Sunday. So Sunday is our big day into Sunday evening, and then things start to improve pretty quickly as we get into early Monday as the storm picks up speed and races up toward North Florida. So that's kind of the breakdown, Jay and Shannon, of what we're looking at for the next few. It's beautiful out there today. That's what we see when a hurricane approaches. We have high pressure around the hurricane. That brings us sunshine, but don't be fooled. It's still coming, and it's still a big weather event for South Florida.
And so when you say, Steve, you know, you feel the energy that people say, this lean or this wobble. And as you've mentioned before with Hurricane Matthew, you know, the significance of a wobble can be tremendous, right?
I did it myself this morning. I'll tell you what happened. I left some big furniture outside on the patio that I was going to deal with this morning. And I get out there and I saw the 11 a.m. shift. And I'm like, you know, this is looking a little bit better. And then I thought to myself, those tracks could easily go back to the east, and I'm here. I don't have time to deal with that. So I got that furniture secured, because you have to, in the back of your mind, be thinking worst case scenario. It's fine to be optimistic, but be thinking that this could be stronger. And the official this is a Category 4 hurricane making landfall in South Florida. So don't be fooled. Prepare for the worst case scenario, and that would be very, very strong winds that could move some significant furniture around, outdoor patio furniture, and do some damage. Prepare for that. Don't prepare for the scenario where it's a nice day out there.
Best advice, Steve Weigel. Thank you very much, Steve. We'll be tapping back into Steve as we get continuous updates of Hurricane Irma. Jay Cashmere alongside Shannon Cake here. We'll be taking you through the next 2 hours as WPTV provides continuous wall-to-wall coverage as we enter the duration. We're in the preparation stage of Hurricane Irma right now, but that stage will be ending, as Steve indicated, probably sometime later tomorrow when things start to deteriorate or weather conditions go downhill, and then we'll be in the duration stage and then, of course, the aftermath stage. A lot happening right now throughout the state. We just heard from Governor Scott. He was at the South Florida Water Management District earlier. He just had a press briefing, unloaded a lot of information talking about all the traffic, everyone evacuating to be safe, and safety of the citizens of Florida is top priority.
And he said if you were planning to evacuate, still at this point, if you have it in your mind that you're going to evacuate, you need to be on the road. That was really his message. You need to be on the road now, and if you've been ordered to evacuate, go ahead and get out now. I think we've been hearing whatever this wobble or lean or whatever ends up happening with the track, in the next 24, 48 here. The preparation has to have happened, and the winds will start to deteriorate, according to our weather team, within the next, 12 hours. So preps have to be done. And with that, our Megan McRoberts is in Stewart.
Where the window of opportunity to prepare is going down and shrinking as we speak. Megan McRoberts, how are things out there up in Stewart?
Jay and Shannon, it's really something to see the view out here in downtown Stewart. If you've ever been down here, it's typically bustling with people visiting the little shops and restaurants here. A much different scene already tonight. Take a look just at the businesses here. I mean, there's dozens of businesses all shuttered up. It appears all the business owners have really heeded those warnings. They've finished all their boarding up and their precautions, and there's really not many people left to be seen here. You can see there are some cars. There are still a few last-minute business owners that we've spoken to who are wrapping up preparations, and there are just 2 businesses that we found that are still open. There are restaurants. There's a City Bistro down the road, and then if you see behind me, Duffy's is sticking it out, giving people some warm meals as long as possible. We did talk to them, though, about employee safety. They tell us, at any point, these employees can go home if they need to beat curfews in the city where they live, or if conditions just start to pick up a little too much. And they tell me they are, though, thinking about employee safety. But there are some drivers in here in the area. Most of the cars you see are people just getting a quick meal before these businesses close down. As you drive around downtown Stewart and other areas in the city like Cantor and US 1, very similar. The roads are pretty much empty, not a lot of drivers. So we just assume people are either evacuated at this point, or they've wrapped up their supply shopping, or there's just really no businesses to drive to anymore. So before I send it back to you, just one last thing to drive home here in Martin County. I've been getting calls and some emails from residents concerned that they are seeing neighborhoods still with a lot of trash and a lot of yard debris on their curbs. There is still an hour left. I want to stress that there's still 1 hour left where if you have anything on the side of the road that could become a wind hazard, you can still take it to the Martin County landfill. So 4 o'clock is when that shuts down if you want to get any of those, again, trash items or yard debris off the side of the road. That's the latest here in Stewart. I'm Megan McRoberts. Back to you.
Megan McRoberts in Stewart Forest. Megan, thank you very much. We're talking about all the hot commodities right now. The governor spoke of gas. It's certainly one of the biggest and highest priorities right now. The governor's saying he wants those gas stations in the evacuation zones to stay open as long as possible. We've seen the tankers. They're getting police escorts right now, and that's going to continue until they just can't possibly go anymore. Massive tankers have entered 3 ports in the state, delivering millions of gallons of gasoline. That will end after tonight once conditions really deteriorate. So there's enough gas to get us into this storm right now, and it's certainly a hot commodity right now as people look to leave Palm Beach County and up on the Treasure Coast.
In fact, Dan Kennedy is in Jupiter checking things out for us in that area. Dan?
And good afternoon to you both. In fact, in just a moment, you're going to hear from a man who just left Palm Beach County. He came up here to the Jupiter area where he just filled up his car with gas, and he's not alone. He was in this long line of cars waiting in line for what has certainly become a very hot commodity in this entire state. Gas right now going for $2.89, and most everyone I'm speaking with has been waiting in this line for upwards of 40 minutes. They're filling up their cars. There's a $40 limit, and Willie is the man I just promised you'd hear from up from Palm Beach County. How you doing, sir?
Very good. How are you?
Good. All right, so you ready for this? You staying?
Yeah.
And why is that? You seem pretty confident.
What can I say? It's the first time it's going to happen to me, so I don't know what I do. Just stay or go somewhere, I don't know.
And where exactly are you coming from?
I used to live in New York.
Okay, but where'd you just come from today?
Oh, from West Palm Beach Garden.
Okay, and where are you headed now?
I got to go back to home.
You're going back home, huh?
Yeah.
What brought you to Jupiter today?
Over here? Mm-hmm. What I do over here? No, I work over here in Jupiter.
Gotcha. And then what do you have in your car? Tell me about this.
I have a couple of things. Ice, the propane, some extra gas, and a little things. Water. Not big not big deal, but the rest is fun.
And who all are you riding the storm out with?
How what?
Who are you going to be riding the storm out with? Who are you with in the car?
Oh, with my wife.
Okay, good deal. Well, we wish you the best of luck through everything,
Thank you very
and we're
much.
glad you got
Thank
your
you
gas.
guys. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Willie, one of many people, like we said, who has been waiting at the Shell station. Guys, it's been upwards of a 45-minute wait for a lot of people. Interestingly enough, most everyone we've spoken to in this line is choosing to stay here in this general vicinity, choosing to ride out the storm. They're stocking up just in case. And I just spoke with the Shell gas station. They say no more supplies coming in today. What they have right now is what they have, and once they're out, they're out. We're going to keep an eye on it for you, though, here on Indiantown Road in Jupiter. Dan Kennedy, now back to you.
Dan, thank you. So post-storm, they'll have a full tank of gas to get around for the few days, because we'll be in a similar situation. If we feel the impact like we're anticipating, then it'll be a day or two before they can get these tankers in and rolling again. I know that, for the last 2 weeks, the governor has been saying fuel was going to be his top priority, and certainly in the last 4 days, it's been a big push. We've seen, as you mentioned, police escorts into the state of Florida, and I know things are pre-positioned as well. So, but these folks are probably smart to top it off and be ready on the back end of this thing.
Because we don't know what the back end will bring, and topping it off is certainly the best option. Another thing, another top priority right now is all the animals around the area. About 2 hours ago, I dropped my big Great Dane off, Jake, with some loving, caring family members who are going to watch him throughout the duration. A lot of people are actually surrendering animals. The Humane Society of the Treasure Coast is taking in hundreds of animals right now. It's a very dire situation because a lot of the shelters around are becoming overcrowded and filled. They're having problems staffing with those issues as well. Sam Smink is live in West Palm Beach right now talking with Animal Care and Control. Sam, how's the situation there?
Jay, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but they're actually getting calls now of dogs being chained to trees and even cars. I'm joined by the director of the Animal Care and Control, Diane. Diane, tell us more about this.
Well, it's really concerning. We're getting a lot of calls into our communications section at Palm Beach County Animal Care and Control that residents have evacuated. Neighbors are calling us and saying, my neighbors have evacuated, and there are dogs chained to trees, chained to parked cars. So this is just really devastating for us. We're already stretched thin, but we are sending people out, sending our officers out to try to do what we can for these dogs, and we will be removing them.
It's illegal, right?
It's absolutely illegal. Palm Beach County has a chaining, tethering ordinance which prohibits chaining or tethering of any dog outdoors at any time unless you're physically present with that dog. So when you're doing this in the face of such a devastating storm, this is absolutely felony animal cruelty. It's deliberate, it's intentional, and we will prosecute people for this. So residents need to be reminded there is no excuse for this. We have a pet-friendly shelter. Pets, humans, they're welcome there. It's in Boynton at the West Boynton Gymnasium. There's just absolutely no excuse to do such an atrocity as chaining a defenseless animal outside with a storm of this magnitude coming.
Absolutely. We were sitting here in unbelief about this. And another situation you've been seeing is that, for example, there were 42 animals that were surrendered to your shelter yesterday, and you expect more today. So what can we do to help with that?
Well, we need people to understand that they really need to take their pet with them. We don't want any pets left behind during a storm, but, slow down and think about this a little bit, because if you are looking at your animal or your dog or your cat as something that's just replaceable, we're not going to turn you away, but you certainly are going to go on a do not adopt list at all of our shelters, including private shelters, because I know that there are always extenuating circumstances, but to just say, I'm leaving, I don't want to take my pet with me, it's just an excuse that we aren't going to be very tolerant of. We're going to take that pet because we'd much rather have it at our facility than find it tied up in our parking lot after the storm has passed. But people need to slow down and think this through, and and ask yourself, is this part of my family? If it's not part of your family, then maybe you shouldn't have pets.
And I was at Animal Care and Control earlier today, and one of your captains was saying that during a hurricane, usually a county shelter serves as the place where if animals are displaced after the storm, you take them in. So you need to make room.
Right. Animal Care and Control in Palm Beach County is the lead agency for all animal issues. That means that our shelter must be freed up to take in all displaced animals. We don't allow agencies to come in and just start taking animals in a random fashion. The goal is to empty our shelter so that all those animals that are displaced stay in our area. We do not allow animals to be moved outside of our county unless it's the animals, the dogs and cats that have already been in our adoption program. Those are the ones that need to be moved out right now to make room for that impending and absolute certain deluge of displaced animals that are coming in.
So for you at home watching this, you may be wondering what you can do. They have more than 100 animals ready to be adopted or fostered. They're looking for any animal rescue groups or private shelters that can come in and get these animals out. Also, if you are in the county, you are allowed to foster. You do not have to be pre-approved. And if you want to adopt, they are waiving the adoption fee. We'll have much more of this information on our website. For now, reporting live, Sam Smink, WPTV News Channel 5.
Sam, thank you very much. Heartbreaking to think what people are doing right now. I know I spoke with officials with the Humane Society of the Treasure Coast. They're seeing such an influx, as I mentioned, of hundreds of animals. And the problem here is that they have assigned crew, assigned staff members riding out the storm with the numbers that they thought they were going to get.
Exactly.
Now they have all of these extra animals as well as animal care and control. And it's so hard on the staff right now. So it becomes a major problem. Then you have people who are chaining their animals up outside. Officials are having to go get those animals. It's a problem. It's an absolute problem. There's another equation here that you can talk about, whether Diane so eloquently said that perhaps they shouldn't be pet owners if this is the problem. We can have a whole other day of discussion with that. But nonetheless, the situation at hand right now, if you can help, if you can do anything, contact Animal Care and Control, the Humane Society, just any help they can get. And
with
again,
fostering
with fostering,
or
adopting right now, there's a small window again that we have right now.
We're going to take a quick break. We're touching base with our weather team, the all-important News Channel 5 Storm Team 5 team, coming up right after the break. Throughout the day, we've been monitoring all things Irma for you. Nuggets of information are coming in from different agencies and counties as decisions are made throughout the day. Our Tanya Rogers is in the newsroom monitoring some information that's just come in from Disney, actually. Tanya?
That's right, the happiest place on earth. Now, with Irma just bearing down on us, Disney World has decided that they are going to close their theme park. That's going to be on Sunday, September 10th and Monday, September 11th. Now, this does include Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. I know we've heard many friends who were heading to that or have gone in the past and love it, but that has been canceled. At the same time, I also want to mention that Universal Studios has Rock the Universe. That has been canceled over the weekend. That is where Christian singers come in and put on a great big concert, but that has been canceled as well. But don't forget, Disney closed on Sunday, September 10th, and also on Monday, September 11th. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Tanya, a lot of closings, a lot of things we'll be updating you throughout the next several days on, pretty much for the next week, depending upon how this storm ends up and the aftermath of the storm. Mandatory evacuations began today for a lot of residents in our area. Almost nearly 250,000 people are being evacuated throughout Palm Beach County, up on the Treasure Coast as well. News Channel 5's Alyssa Hyman on South Hutchinson Island right now, where they're preparing for the arrival of Hurricane Irma. Alyssa.
Well, that's exactly right here on South Hutchinson Island in St. Lucie County. This plaza right here should give you an idea of just how empty the area is, which is a good thing because, as you mentioned, those mandatory evacuations for this area just went into effect this afternoon around 3 o'clock this afternoon. This Cumberland Farms completely boarded up, and then take a look at the gas pumps, completely saran wrapped because there just simply isn't any more gas. And then take a look at the plaza behind me. All of the storefronts completely shuttered up, boarded up. We did speak to a couple of residents out here who live on Hutchinson Island here in St. Lucie County, many of them making that very difficult decision to evacuate.
Scared that I'm not going to have a place to come back to. That's basically the main thing. I really am. I've never been so frightened.
Leaving the only thing that we own and losing it is the hardest part. I did take what is important. That I don't want to lose, but it's difficult. It's very stressful. The whole week has been stressful.
Obviously a very difficult decision for many, but if you are in those mandatory evacuation zones, it is very important that you leave because it could get very dangerous where you live. Now, some of those shelters here in St. Lucie County will open up today, many of them opening up tomorrow. And then there, of course, is a 5 p.m. press conference in St. Lucie County at the Emergency Operations Center. That press conference at 5 o'clock this evening. Reporting live on Hutchinson Island, Alyssa Hyman, WPTV News Channel 5.
Alyssa, thank you. We want to get to Steve Weigel now. We were talking earlier about the latest track that had come out earlier, a few hours back, and Steve was kind of analyzing it and giving us a little more of his thoughts on the lean, the wobble, what do we want to call it?
Yeah, there's a little, you mean, well, now which one, Shannon? The track shift, there is a track shift that happened at 11 a.m. where it brought some of the tracks in more west by a few miles. So, you know, we're watching everything mile by mile now. So that was the new model tracks. And then there's a little shift with the Euro model this afternoon that also brings it a little farther west. And there's a little wobble going on right now as you'll notice the eye of this storm is just pushing a little toward the northwest. Now, the Hurricane Center doesn't jump on anything like this. They want to see like a 4 to 6 hour trend here before they see something go a little bit longer. But that's an interesting little jump there. And look at that satellite loop. That is really incredible. Even the high, thin cirrus clouds out ahead of the storm, some of those are already starting to work in around the Keys right now. But that's the real core of the hurricane. What's been happening in the last few days is that the strongest winds have been in the northern two quadrants, so the northeast quadrant and the northwestern quadrant. And the strongest winds are right along that eye wall right there, which is about 20 miles wide. But it may be going through, it appears to be going through an eye wall, what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. So the eye gets very, very small, and just the dynamics, the physics of it just can't support that small eye wall, and it breaks down and a new eye forms that's a little bit wider, and that becomes the new eye for the hurricane. It's been going through this for the last week, and actually Matthew did it as it approached Florida too. And when it is happening, the winds are a little bit weaker near the core, and that's something to watch as the storm gets closer, because it actually starts that process as it gets closer or very near us. The winds can be a little bit less as the storm moves through. And at this point, we'll take anything we can get as far as the winds dropping off a little bit. But there's a look at the current conditions with our storm, and of course that track coming in across South Florida on, well, here's the timeline right here. So the winds right now, 155, moving west at 14. And here's the forecast track, very close to the northern side of Cuba, and then a turn after that, Category 4 Saturday evening, and then coming in across around the Middle Keys. At this point, there's Key West, Key Largo up in this area. So that's 145-mile-an-hour winds, better than the 185 we were watching the other day as it went through the Virgin Islands, but definitely a powerful, very damaging hurricane. And then tracking up just east of Fort Myers, western side of the lake, and then coming right up the state and weakening after that. And it weakens very quickly for a couple of reasons. It's undergoing wind shear. It's lost its energy source, which is the warm waters of the ocean, and that's what's really fueling this thing at this point. And that's why it's been able to keep a lot of its current strength, because the water is running in the high 80s in the Bahamas and through the Florida Straits, and those temperatures are ideal conditions to keep either this at the same intensity or maybe even a little bit stronger than it actually is. It is possible, it's unlikely, but it is possible for this to make landfall as a Category 5 hurricane. At this point, it's very, very close. Keep in mind, it's 155 miles an hour. Those are the winds. We get up to 2 more miles an hour, and it's a Category 5 again. So we're very close to that. There's the official forecast right there, and the new model tracks have shifted. You can see the lake at this point, Lake Okeechobee. Remember yesterday? It was very difficult to see that, pretty much impossible. And then up the state after that. So we're watching those model runs very closely. And here are the chances for tropical storm force winds, and then through the weekend, above 90%. The probability of hurricane force winds across South Florida, at least in our area, range anywhere from about 30 to 35%. And those are, of course, critical numbers that we'll keep you up to date on too. Now, what about the times of arrival for our strong winds? It looks like Saturday late afternoon, the tropical storm force winds work into southern Palm Beach County and then just spread up through the area. The peak winds and rainfall for this hurricane and the potential for storm surge will be Sunday afternoon and evening. So today looks good. Some rain squalls, gusty winds. You can still get outside and do some final preparations. Tomorrow morning's not bad, but the afternoon goes downhill quickly. Tomorrow evening, we're developing this tropical storm force winds, so that's 39 miles an hour or stronger. Into Saturday night, still winds climbing, torrential rains. Sunday afternoon and evening, the peak winds and rain. And we were actually just talking, the storm team talking about how the timeline for this has been shifted back a little bit. The storm its arrival time here is a little bit slower, but probably about 2 to 4 hours. So that delays the advancing winds and rain a little bit. Yesterday when we were talking, it looked like Boca and Delray. We're looking at about 3 p.m. Saturday for those gusty winds. Now it looks more like 6 p.m., like early evening, late afternoon, early evening for the tropical storm force winds to develop. So we'll keep that's something that's going to change right up until the storm moves in. So we want to keep everyone up to date on how much more time you have to prepare and get things ready before it gets a little bit. You don't want to be on a ladder when the wind's blowing 35, 40 miles an hour. That's just dangerous. So we'll definitely keep you up to date on the timeline the next 2 days.
Just curious, Steve, so for the last few days we focused so much on the turn. Is that still going to be the key in terms of locking in the track?
Yeah. And you know, the turn happens because the trough comes down and the high weakens a little bit, and the hurricane sees that weakness in the atmosphere, and it's right over Florida, and that gives it, let me go back a few frames and I can show you that, the spaghetti model tracks, the model guidance tracks as it works closer to our area. I believe it's the next there. Oh, flip one too far. There it is right there. So it sees that turn, and that turn is about this time tomorrow, maybe early evening on Saturday. It's more of a gradual turn. If you remember a couple of days ago, it was more like a right-hand turn where it came right up and then it just jog right to Florida. It's a little bit more gradual now, so the trough's a little bit slower coming in, and that gives it a little push to the west. And I said this a few minutes ago, I'll say it again. These models shift a little bit farther east again like they were earlier this morning, then the track is going to shift too. So don't panic by that, just prepare for the worst case scenario, which is at this point a Category 4 coming in across South Florida. It's weird to look at that because I think a lot of people have become numb to the fact we watched a 5 for almost a week move through the Leeward Islands and do so much damage, and this is a little weaker, but there's a storm to take seriously. This is much stronger than Francis, Jean, and Wilma at the same time, so keep that in mind.
And Steve, that critical window of the turn that you all are going to be watching so closely, you mentioned tomorrow evening at this time, or around this time tomorrow evening?
No, it's not a sudden turn. It's fairly gradual, but we'll be able to track it and watch it on the satellite loop as it happens. But yeah, it's in about 24 hours from now we should start to be able to go, okay, it's starting to make that turn.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. We'll be tapping back in with Steve and our whole weather team here behind the scenes, giving you the most up-to-date information. As Steve indicated earlier, they are now watching this mile by mile, so every minute we can really give you the most updated information right here on WPTV. Those spaghetti loops, the tracks going right through the Keys, it's so ominous to look at a Category 4 hurricane and what could impact the Florida key chain and just where it will hit. We just got a media advisory out of Key West right now. They've been really trying to evacuate everyone out of Monroe County. The mandatory evacuations are underway right now. The last Key West transit evacuation bus is leaving Key West today at 5 o'clock. It's going to be a point where it's going to be too late after this, but you already should have gotten out of the Keys. But if you haven't, if you have loved ones who are still in the area, perhaps in Key West, there's a bus leaving today at 5 o'clock. It's the last one. There'll be no buses on Saturday. Pretty much after this, it's your last chance to get out of Key West or any portion of the Keys up in Monroe County. Again, mandatory evacuations. That is a spot really the governor has honed in on. He wants everybody out of the Keys if they can, and if they're going to stay, they really need to take serious precautions.
And for good reason when you look at that track that Steve just laid out for us. And, on the heels of that, the governor did mention in his press briefing a short time ago out of Lee County that if you're in an evacuation zone anywhere, whether it be the Keys or certainly in our area as we start getting a visit from Irma in whatever form or fashion, if you're in an area and you feel like you cannot get out and you are in an evacuation zone, there is an 800 number that you can call, and the state is going to do the very best they can, local officials, to get you out. The number is 800-342-3557, 800-342-3557.
All right, we're going to take a quick break right now. Back with more in a moment.
You need this mic?
Yeah, let's do that one. 40.
Thanks.
Here.
Yep. Thanks.
Lindsay, I gave the doctor my pen.
Welcome back to WPTV. Continuous coverage of the arrival of Hurricane Irma right now. We've been talking about evacuations throughout the state. Nearly 500,000 people are on the roads or have been on the roads for a better part of the last 48 hours right now. This is a live look right now at the Florida Turnpike just outside of Orlando right now. The Turnpike has been really wall to wall for the last 48 hours. Traffic very, very slow. In fact, up near I-75, where the Turnpike turns into I-75, the governor has ordered shoulders to be open. It's sort of a mechanism where they can get more traffic, more flow out of the state, and that's going to happen in the northern section of the state all the way to the Georgia line. That's on I-75. Nonetheless, the stretch of the Turnpike all the way from Miami south all the way up is busy, very busy today. Again, people utilizing the last window of opportunity that they have to get to a safer place, safer area where they can ride out this storm and not be in harm's way. We're going to stay on top of the situation with traffic real quickly. FLL511.com. That is a website dedicated to all your traffic needs, evacuation updates, FLL511.com.
One of the largest evacuations in Florida history. That's what we're looking at here. And, you know, there's a lot to think about. People, just like you right now, you're running around and you're doing last-minute packing of your car if you're evacuating, or you're doing last-minute preps around your home. I was just doing them right before we came in. I know you were throwing up your shutters and getting Jake tucked in, your Great Dane tucked in for, you know, what is ahead with Irma. I have an injury on my toe from putting up my shutters, and I'm in good hands because Dr. David Soria, our medical expert, is here in studio. Don't you hate that? You're a doctor. Yeah. Can you look at my toe? No, I'm good. I'm good. But seriously, you know, there's a lot of injuries. It can happen out there as we're rushing around. You know, we're frazzled. You know, we're trying to get our last-minute preps. You are saying that you're seeing a couple of common injuries. What are they?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, because of the hurriedness and many times the urgency of things, that tends to come with ill preparedness or, you know, sometimes just a little bit of carelessness. So we see a little bit of everything. But if we had to name some trends, clearly it's two things. One is falls, because we have people getting on ladders. They're just not used to getting on ladders. Right. So they get up there, things are slippery and unsteady, and we see a lot of falls. So we're seeing a lot of trunk, head, and even extremity injuries.
Really?
But most importantly, it's these razor-sharp shutters. These things, they hold them out. They're not wearing gloves. They slide, and we're seeing a lot of hand injuries, finger injuries, extremities, forearms. It's just a terrible thing. So if there's anything that I could give the folks a heads up on is know that these are the trends we see, and so be prepared for that. Wear protective gloves. Have at least two people, if not three, helping you out. Know that these are the things we're seeing. Know that it can happen to you. It's not such where it's not going to happen to you. You're going to be on a ladder. You're going to be holding very sharp, heavy items. Be prepared. Don't take things for granted, really.
As we all prepare, David, when we see our checklist of what we have to do, those with medical conditions and they're about to enter this critical phase riding out this storm, what is a checklist for someone like that with a serious medical condition ready to ride this out?
So no question about it. This is what I want you to think of. Think that there is going to be no electricity in your home and you're not going to be able to get on the road. So what do you need for your health or your loved one's health, knowing that you're not going to be able to have electricity or access roads? So number one, write down all the emergency numbers that you need, because Google's not going to be available. You're not going to be able to get on and access those phone numbers. Number two, take a look at your prescription bottles. Look and make sure you have at least a week to 2 weeks worth left in there. If you do not, get to the pharmacy right away. Probably today will be your last day. I highly doubt that any of them will be open, so make sure you get those filled. If you have health issues that require electric for medical devices like aerosols, nebulizers, make sure you have a generator. If you do not, get to a place that has electricity. In other words, get out, because it's very important. With the heat, without the air conditioning. If you have asthmatic or lung issues, it can only be exacerbated, worsened, and you're going to be in a real pickle, because after about 35 to 40 miles an hour, the roads are closed, ambulances are not going to be able to access you. You're going to be at home fending for yourself. Be aware of that, folks.
That is really helpful, because I think if you're at home right now and you're on the fence and you've been thinking about evacuating, the governor and every municipality saying now's the time, but that could be the final word on that, that if you have any of those needs, it's really better to be safe than sorry.
No, always, always, always. If you have any questions, please call your doctors today.
Dr. David Surya.
We appreciate your time.
You're
Good
very
luck
welcome.
through the storm, Dr. Surya.
You as well.
We'll be right back.
if there's an accident that takes place on your property.
Absolutely. You don't think about that. Quick question. I hope you can settle this for my husband and I. We had a discussion this morning about this. Video or photos? Is it better to hand over to your insurance company? Do you know? What's
you
better?
know, I don't know that there's any best.
Not that I'm airing my laundry here, but we had a family discussion about this.
In some cases, you may be able to better show the difference with video.
So I was right.
And you know, you can actually get the 360 angle on certain things. It's hard to do with a photo.
Right, it is, and that's kind of was my thinking. But I guess having both is probably pretty helpful.
Yeah, and so Shannon's always right.
You can take a video of this interview and send it to your husband, right?
Oh, right,
It's proof,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Rod Davis, president of the Better Business Bureau of Southeast Florida. Thank you very much. You've got a long few days ahead of you. Good luck to you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, we're going to switch gears right now. I want to take you back to the track of Hurricane Irma right now. Steve Weigel joining us as we speak, monitoring every mile by mile of this massive storm as it makes its way northwest, right, Steve?
Yeah, it's amazing. Look at it on satellite. It's incredible that the size of this hurricane, even though the hurricane force winds only stretch out a few dozen miles, we have tropical storm force winds that are much farther than that, over 150 in spots. And this hurricane, I think the most incredible thing is that it's kept Category 4 or 5 for so long in the Atlantic and then through the Leeward Islands, and now as it moves through the Turks and Caicos and the north coast of Cuba. It appears that it may be going through one of these eye wall replacement cycles, and it may actually just be finishing that. Now, here's the official forecast. A new one will come out at about an hour from now, just before 5 o'clock. So we have a Category 4 hurricane, winds at 155, moving west at 14, and then right along the north coast of Cuba with that turn happening Saturday evening, and then eventually up into the Florida Keys, likely the Middle Keys. This is an error cone, though, so we could see a track more to the east or to the west, although the last couple of runs, the computer models have been trending west a little bit, and that works in our favor. There's no doubt about it, because it takes some of the strongest winds and moves them over to the west coast. This is why we tell people especially this hurricane, to evacuate to the west coast doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because with the error cone, just about everyone in Florida could feel strong winds from this. And here is our peak wind time. So it starts late afternoon, early evening as it works its way on the western side of the lake. This is its closest approach to us. Remember, last night this track was right over the lake, so it has bumped about 20 to 30 miles west. It's a huge difference, though, in the final the impact as far as the winds and the rainfall. And then it's Category 1 still as it's up around North Florida, and then eventually working up toward Atlanta after that as a big rainmaker on Tuesday and Wednesday. Hurricane watch in effect all across the Treasure Coast and up through the west coast of Florida. We have a hurricane warning that is in effect from Palm Beach County south, and the computer model tracks this afternoon are either staying with that western side of the lake track or actually shifting a little farther west. Nice to see as it moves up the state, and then eventually, look at how tightly clustered they are at this point, almost right on top of each other. So it's very likely that the official forecast at 5 o'clock will probably match up to what we have right now with that track just west of Lake Okeechobee. As far as the chance for seeing tropical storm force winds, so 39 miles an hour stronger, up above 90%, but the hurricane force wind probability actually has dropped a little bit from last night. We were around 40 to 45%. Now we're in the low to mid 30s. It's encouraging. That means the track as it shifts west takes us out of some of the strongest winds. So we'll watch that trend to continue. And the arrival times, so there is 3 p.m. on Saturday, still not into our area, but it spreads quickly by about 6, 7 o'clock across West Palm, and then eventually, these are 39 miles an hour stronger, and then across the entire viewing area Saturday night through early Sunday. And the peak winds at this point appear to be Sunday late afternoon through the evening. And with the future tracks, it's going to be critical how far west this thing stays, because if it stays farther away or even trends farther west, we get out of some of the strongest winds, and we may just be dealing with at least part of the area into strong tropical storm force winds and maybe some hurricane gusts. So this is the time for everyone just really to keep an eye on this and keep idea of what the track is doing. And a new track comes up at 5 o'clock tonight.
And if it stays on the current track right now, the storm surge